Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Stuart, I don't know. I think I simply want to announce a date that it's January 13th, 10:03. We are calling the meeting to order.
Yes, Mayor, I will take attendance if that is okay.
Yes, please.
And we can go through. Trustee White?
Here.
Sorry, Dana. Trustee Lopez?
Present.
Trustee Fritchie?
I am here.
Deputy Mayor Quezada?
Listen, thank you.
And Mayor Levin?
Here.
Thank you all. Okay, Mayor.
I think we're going to have this meeting. We're going to go into exec session for this, or is it just totally public?
No, it's just a special meeting. It was not.
Okay, so we're going to call a special meeting.
Right.
I didn't know if we also wanted to go to exec, sorry. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for gathering this morning. We called this meeting because we recognize we have a lot going on with the comprehensive plan, and the goal is to have the comprehensive plan and zoning recommendations approved simultaneously. And we wanted to really give the board an opportunity to, and whoever may be watching in the public, to fully understand the thinking that went behind these recommendations. We have Pat Yost here this morning, representing as the co-chair of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. We also have Trustees Lopez and Trustee Quezada, who are on the steering committee as well. And with that, we'd like to take you into a somewhat a wonky and planning presentation, but also in the context of why we came to these, the steering committee came to these conclusions, what the thinking was, and what the impact can potentially be. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Pat and Jaime.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. So Jaime and I will go back and forth a little bit on the conversation. Melissa Morris Banta will also join. She had a couple of last minute things pop up, but I know as soon as she can, she'll join the conversation as well as the co-chair. So, Jaime, do you want to pop the presentation up, and then Jaime will probably go through the first couple of slides just to kind of give a little bit of background around SWOT, and these are kind of the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats from an Austin perspective that the planning committee has put together, and then a significant amount of the proposed zoning. So some of the proposed zoning changes come out of the T zone and the S75 zone. And so we want to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the analysis that we did in order to come up with recommendations, and then talk about the recommendations a little bit, and then have some discussion, right? I think this is intended to try and talk about a relatively complicated and very, very a lot of interrelated parts, and try and just give folks, especially the people who haven't necessarily been involved with this from over the last year, the chance to ask questions and understand some of the thinking around and the pros and cons, the factual, the pros and cons of the different recommendations that are currently in the draft version of the draft. Does that make sense? Does that meet everybody's needs for today?
Yeah, so for me, this sounds like a presentation of information. I'm always interested in the desired outcome. So you've got a bunch of trustees, the mayor, et cetera, on the call. I need to understand the desired outcome coming out of this meeting, and that there's a hard stop. So everybody should be mindful that some of us on the call can only be on this call, and that the call cannot extend beyond our ability to be here at that. So this meeting is not going to go on beyond when some of us have to leave. Okay.
So we'll go through I think the pages up front will talk a little bit about the SWOT analysis, as well as the some of the desired sort of objectives, right, coming out of it. And I think this was all sent to everybody on Friday, so we should need to read through stuff. So, Jaime, do you want
right,
to go quickly through the first?
Yes,
first
I
4 or 5
am.
pages?
I'm ready to go. I will first say good morning to everyone, and I will try to be as lively and chipper in my voice as I can be. I know it's early morning for a lot of people, and we're in a rush. So with that, we have about 33 slides, and we'll try to go through them as quickly as possible. So first, talking about the strengths, there are, obviously a lot of strengths that Ossining has. We tried to highlight some top level ones, like being a socially, economically diverse community. It's a riverfront community with many neighborhoods that offer spectacular views of the Hudson River. It is a TOD village, so it has one train station obviously in it, and has 2 train stations sort of on the edge of it that service a lot of people who live in the village. It has a strong Main Street business that are succeeding despite kind of the failure that you're seeing in a lot of other main streets. So we've had a lot of success to sort of persevere through COVID. And we have a highly engaged local community, which is certainly to the benefit of the village. Some of the weaknesses that we have would be that, despite recent improvements in investment in housing stock, many homes do remain in substandard condition and do not meet current code requirements. And also they don't conform with the current zoning. Sort of a subnote to that is that areas with high levels of pre-existing non-conforming housing stock tend to have the highest rates of substandard housing and overcrowding. And so because of that, we have overcrowding and dangerous living conditions that exist here in the village. We also have high housing costs, which kind of can make difficult, can compromise housing choices. There are few housing opportunities for people who are trying to age in place, at least here in the village.
Okay, I need to ask a question, excuse me. I don't want to interrupt 33 pages. I already have 2 questions on this one, and we haven't really even gotten past number 2. Are we to ask questions at the end of this or as we go along? I'm concerned about as we go along because we'll never get past number 5. So what is your preferred methodology here, folks?
So I think that because we want to go through this and because some of the questions will be answered again, this is just a summary of things that came out of the feedback we got. So why don't we save questions for the end in the interest of efficiency?
Great, thank you.
Great. So there are high taxes, a disproportionate burden on the residential properties due to a lack of commercial development. And there's also a lack of public transportation options and limited biking paths, which sort of drives a car-dependent community, and with Route 9 being sort of a kind of a psychic dividing line between the village, sort of separating the village in some ways into 2 communities. Opportunities, right? So there are a tremendous amount of opportunities. There's a growing hub of entrepreneurial activities, not just including retail and commercial and restaurant businesses, but other types of businesses that are popping up. There's a wide array of attractive and unique open space resources that are potential drivers of local tourism. In particular, note are the Crawbucky, Sing Sing, Kill Greenway, as well as the Ossining Croton, the Old Croton Aqueduct Trail. There's a rich history in the village, a growing arts community, and Sing Sing Prison Museum is sort of positioning Ossining as a destination as the future comes. And the diversity really fosters a lot of placemaking for families, seniors, and millennials, as well as a variety of housing options and a high level of walkability. I mean, there's pretty much sidewalks throughout most of the village. And so that positions Ossining as a leader in sustainability. Threats. So the threats to the village are really the overcrowded housing versus issues with an overcrowded school district. There's a lot of public opposition to overcrowding, which is sort of the number of people per bedroom and illegal units. It tends to be conveyed as an opposition to increased density, which is really the number of housing units per acre. So, the most dense property in the village would be Harbor Square. But Harbor Square is not particularly overcrowded. probably the most overcrowded parts of the village look a lot different than sort of luxury apartments that are, stacked on top of each other in a taller building. There are also code enforcement limitations. So part of the problem is that while we control code enforcement here, we don't control the courts. And so a lot of the decisions that get made, unfortunately, despite the efforts of the code enforcement officers, don't necessarily get translated into punishment or changes in the district. There's concerns about gentrification, social inequity, and there are also environmental challenges. We have a village that has a significant amount of property that's low level, and so with climate change and sea level rise, there are concerns about how to manage the waterfront property and integrate that to any plan. And of course, the economic fallout from COVID-19, which every community is facing. So today we're talking a little bit about suggested actions that should directly support plan objectives.
Hello. Yeah.
That are derived from pre-work RFP in subcommittees and
Who's this, Paul?
focus on.
Oh,
Hey, Bob, you gotta mute yourself, or I don't know if I'm the host or somebody else says they need to mute.
Yeah, I
Bob.
muted him. I just muted him.
Thank you.
So we want to drive inclusive economic development and increase the tax base. We want to enable the construction of multifamily housing in places where there is already a prevailing pattern of multifamily housing, supporting transit-oriented development and walkability. We want to address parking, transportation, and mobility. We'd like to preserve and develop quality affordable housing options in conjunction with market rate development. We want to encourage affordable home ownership and local investment in conjunction with development. And we want to adjust zoning issues identified in the plan development process and from previous years where possible. With that, we'd also like to encourage and enable green space and overall accessibility foot biking. That last one, really all of these, but that last one in particular, it's in response to trying to make sure that whatever recommendations we have really do focus on the people that live here and the experience that they have and enjoying their life here. We everything that we've tried to promote here is really about figuring out where challenges exist for the people who live here and helping to alleviate those challenges.
Yeah, and Jaime, I think the other place where, go back the last slide, right? If you could. The other place where I think the committee really is focused in on the who lives here now is the third to last bullet point, right? Which is, affordable home ownership and local investment. And that means the ability for people to invest in the properties that they own or the properties that they live in, whether it's, commercial or residential, right? So I think that's something that as the committee's had these study halls, that's something that continues to pop up.
So the zoning remedies that we've identified, number one is, good planning requires zoning that would facilitate a community vision, addresses weaknesses, builds on strengths, and maximizes opportunities. And the primary goals of the proposed zoning that we're talking about today is really, this is a really critical piece. We want to correct previous zoning bulk requirements that were imposed in the 1960s that were incompatible with the existing built environment. So, at a high level, the village was mostly developed under a zoning code that was set up in the 1930s. The majority of the village conforms, not the village, but the S75 and T districts that we're talking about today conform with that 1930s code. But in 1960, there was a decision to change the requirements that didn't conform with the fact that over 80% of the village was already built, and has since then just caused increased problems for any property owner who wanted to come in and fix their properties, improve their properties in any way, making it more onerous. And so a lot of what we're talking about today is really about going back to what the original code was. It's not about increasing density or going taller or any of those things. It's about making it easier and more in conformance with the way that it was set up previously. So with that, we also want to facilitate investment in the Austin housing stock that improves and preserves quality housing. We want to create opportunities to preserve and enhance affordability, improve accessibility, and grow local businesses. So we want to optimize assets, our historic and diverse housing stock, our walkability, our mixed-use neighborhoods, our New York City access and environmental and cultural resources that are on trend with sustainable, livable, affordable, and desirable communities of tomorrow. And we really want to right-size the scale of the zoning recommendations to preserve the character and charm of the village of Austin.
Yep.
With that, I'm going to hand this over to Pat to start talking a lot about the kind of the details and the questions that fed into the analysis.
So absolutely. So as we started to, part of the focus of the initial planning for the planning process was, the T zone had been identified as an area of potential opportunity given its some of the challenges, right? As a committee, we actually expanded that to the S75 zone because, when we were going through the walking tours and when we were doing the work, we realized that it was the issues that were existing in the T zone also existed in the S75. So we wanted to kind of, hey, is there conformity or not, right? And then how can the plan encourage investment ownership in light of the current state? We talked about that, right? And we heard about the challenges of making improvements. And then, we wanted to look into what is the root cause, and then how can we change, what kind of changes can we make to remove barriers to investment and improvement in the existing housing stock, as well as, the few spaces in the village that are actually buildable, right? And then we wanted to look at the secondary, potential impacts. So what we did was, go to the next slide. We'll dive into the T zone, the two-family zone, and the S75, which is the single-family zone. 75, is required. The 7,500 square foot lots. There are about 2,500 parcels in these two sections of the village, right? It actually, on an acreage perspective, it covers over a quarter of the entire village, and they're the two largest zoning districts. So, the positive implications on the village, if we can come up with a good solution as part of the plan, are high, right? Between the two districts, there are well over 1,000, listed from a tax perspective, 1,000 individual, over 1,100 single families, but there are, over 652 families and, over 300 three-family and higher apartments, condos, co-ops within these particular zones, right? So we look at what's the prevailing kind of perspective. There, large number of single-family, large number of two-family, but also a non-zero number of three-family and above in these exist in these zones as of right now from a tax perspective. Right? Next page. This is a map that you're going to see consistently over the course of the presentation, and while it is not the whole village, if we did that, this is available for the whole village. Jaime spent a significant amount of time working with the GIS system and the tax base to put together these, and so it's available for the whole village. But in order to show and help explain current situation and potential changes, we're focusing in on this area. So in the middle there, like circling the blue section, which is Park School, you've got a very large T zone, and immediately to the south of that, or bottom of the page, is an S75 zone. And these are fairly good examples of the challenges that we face in the downtown area, immediately contiguous to the village center, right? And a significant amount of individuals there. So you can see, and on the right-hand side, you'll just see the various shades that outline kind of the different houses, right? Okay, next page. The other thing that we did, which to just kind of look into the question of we said, does it make sense? Is it different across the different S75 zones, and is it different across the different T zones? The reality is that the comp planning group isn't necessarily coming out with a recommendation to subdivide, but it is very helpful to look at what's driving potential issues and impacts, you know, from the across the different zones. Okay. Next page. So we looked at conformity, right? The first question is, are they conforming or not? And we looked at 4 kind of key areas. We looked at lot size. We looked at width and frontage. We looked at impervious surface coverage, which is the, you know, either building or, you know, concrete or something like that. And then we looked at pure building coverage. Okay. The reality is that in both the S75 zone and the T zone have the same bulk requirements, i.e., you know, they require a 7,500 square foot lot, greater than the 75-foot width, you know, less than 40% impervious coverage and less than 30% building coverage. The reality is that against those, you know, a significant amount of non-conforming lots versus these. Okay, and the reality is there has not been a significant amount of construction in these two properties, in these two zones, over the course of the last 20 to 30 years. Okay, and we'll show what that looks like a little bit later. But the point here is that, you know, if you only have, you know, half the lots or even a third of the lots in the T zone conforming on lot size, or, you know, 20 or 10% of the lots conforming on width requirements, that's a significant issue. That means that anytime anybody needs to improve something or fix something, they need to go to the appeals in the zoning board, which is a very significant, hurdle, which isn't necessarily, to fundamentally fix a porch. It shouldn't be that difficult when that's an impediment to investment. Okay, next slide. So what Jaime put together, just so that folks could kind of get a sense of how these are set up. So on the left-hand side is, if there was an S75 or a T-zone lot, this is what a conforming property looks like, right? It meets all the requirements. It meets the setbacks. It meets the width. It meets the building size. That's roughly what conforming parcel looks like. On the right-hand side is what a conforming S50 looks like, just so you can get a sense. And the typical lots in the village from a T-zone or an S75 zone are actually narrower and deeper, which creates, which creates the challenges. It means that the setbacks on the width and the frontage and the road setbacks are all a challenge. But it doesn't fundamentally change the look and feel of the area, right? You still have a single family homes, or, you kind of two families or multifamilies, a little bit closer to the street than the zoning. But, when you go and you walk through, it's still, in my perspective, very nice, right? Okay. Next page. Most lots are, smaller than the current bulk requirements. Okay. The way to think about this is that anything in dark blue meets the lot size requirements. And there are only a few places where this really happens, like over on Hamilton Avenue, up against to the left-hand side, just north of Sing Sing, which is the big purple. You've got a stretch there where many of the lots are conforming from a size, but in the bulk of the T-zone along Spring, along State, along, Madison, Lafayette, all those side streets in James Street, significantly smaller lots than according to bulk requirement, than according to the current zoning requirements. Right? You get a similar situation on the next one. Okay, most are narrower than are required from a frontage perspective. These are all rectangular lots, except for we took out the corner lots because those are a little bit different. But once again, the only things that are conforming are yellow or light yellow, and you can see very, very few of those in this area. right? Similarly, though, a bit on the flip side, though, building coverage, anything in the dark blue is actually conforming. So building coverage is actually conforming at this point in most of the area, which is good. But in Furbia, on the flip side, you get more lots that are not conforming on the impervious coverage. And from our perspective, this is primarily a result of kind of parking lots, car parking and stuff in the back of houses. Okay. So the challenge is that when viewed together, right, non-irregular lots is what we're talking about here. So we took out flag and we took out corner lots because those are a little bit special, just kind of everyone's a little bit different. Over 84% of S75 lots and almost 94% of the T parcels are non-conforming on one of the four metrics that we looked at, right? So when you take a look and you combine them all, the reality is that anytime anybody needs to make a change, they've got to go for a variance, okay? And that's a huge impediment to either improving the housing stock or making fixes or pulling building permits, and there's a spiral there, right? Which is, people have to go and get an approval, and so they decide that they may not want to improve something on their own, and then they don't get a building permit, and it's just a bad spiral, right? But if we tried to improve that a little bit and fix those issues, hopefully, some of those improvements come above ground. It makes investment easier and improves the housing stock and just improves the situation for the residents that are currently there. Right? Next page. So we looked at all of these non-conforming lots. The vast majority of these were built prior to the implementation of the current bulk requirements in 1960. And most of them were built before the initial zoning code was enacted in 1930.
Hey, Pat, I'm sort of losing you a little bit. If you could speak either more into your microphones or a little.
Sure. Is this better?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries. No worries. Sorry. I wear this because of the background noise. So, so the point is that for all those non-conforming lots, we took a look at when were they built, and the vast majority of them were built before the implementation of current bulk requirements in 1960, and even before the original zoning code was enacted in 1930. So anything that's dark blue or light blue was built after the current bulk requirements were put in place in 1960. And you can see that there's very, very few of the structures. In fact, over 90% of the T-zone lots were built prior to the bulk requirements. Of the non-conforming lots were so when the current zoning code was put in place, 90% of the lots were immediately made non-compliant. That's probably not the right way to say it, but basically they put all of the lots into a non-compliant state, which is really not the way it should have been done.
Yeah, and this gets back to this sort of, we're not using for lack of a better word, grandfathering, but when you create a situation where you take properties and you have existing non-conforming, and there are a few properties that are existing non-conforming, you say, okay, we're going to just say that those are existing non-conforming, we're going to grandfather them in. That might make sense where a small percentage of the properties are that way. In our instances here in the village, we went from having a community that was conforming largely and made it entirely non-conforming. So it's not as simple as just saying we're going to let a few properties not conform with the code. It's, we've entered into a place where almost virtually nobody is conforming with the code, which is why, as we go farther along into this, the recommendations came out the way that they did. So sorry about that, Pat.
No, absolutely right. And I think you can see, at least in the T-zone, right? If you take a look at the number of properties built by year, from 1988 to 2000s, like minuscule number of properties, right? Part of that's a result of there's not a lot of space, but also there's not a lot of, reinvestment happening. So the similar situation is the same in the S75, just not quite as bad. So 80% of the non-conforming, 87% of the non-conforming lots were built prior to 1960, right? And about 80% of the total lots in the S75 zone were built prior to 1960. So, exactly the same situation where, at a given point in time, the properties were made non-conforming even though they were already there. Yeah. Next. So we started looking at how do we fix this, right? So we started to take a look at, what's the potential implication of how would you ease some non-conforming in order to, remove some of these artificial barriers to improvement and investment in the existing housing stock. If you take a look and you say, okay, what if we ease the lot size? Because we know that there's a significant number of non-conforming. If you take it, right? Oh,
What's going on, huh?
Go back.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's like drifting on its own.
That's fine. Take a look at the, if you go from 7,500 to 5,000, that makes a significant number of the lots conforming, okay? For both the S zone and the S75 zone. When you think about secondary implications though, we'll talk a little bit about that later. But, okay, so if you're looking at trying to make things conforming, well, this would fix a lot of the issues, okay? Similarly, on the next page, if you adjust impervious coverage maximums, that would have a very similar impact, right? In terms of, how do you remove some of these barriers to improving, okay?
Yeah,
So
and I want to add like just a note to that. Part of the problem is that there's no parking on the street, and so people are putting driveways in and parking cars behind their house, which I think most people would agree, if you can put 2 or 3 cars behind the house and have a skinny little driveway on the side, that's preferable to not having any parking at all. But the coverage requirement, the total coverage requirement of 40%, is particularly acute when you have small lots. So if you're in an S125 district, you don't need 40% coverage, right? Because that's going to be covering a very
Okay, so now you're going now into solutions while we're still looking at data. If you don't mind, I prefer to look at the data than have those conversations.
Okay.
Because that's already a conclusion, not data collection. If we can get through the presentation the way it's written, and then we can go through what we think is the conclusions.
Okay. Right. Next page. So then we said, okay, what if we just make the requirements to be consistent with the S50 zone, right? And the reality is that makes that would make it have an impact, right? It would free up, because of the compounding challenges related to the different requirements, it frees up some 300 units, makes them conforming. Okay. If we just shifted to the S50, we said, okay, well, that's good. But, what if we, take another step and, because of the way that the lots are structured and what Jaime was just talking about, what if we make additional changes, right? And said, okay, what if we, further adjust the coverage? Next slide is right. Okay. If we further adjust the coverage requirements to match the existing conditions, then you actually make, about 500 of the, 480 of these, non-conforming units conforming, right? They exist. And it's only on the lot size and width and bulk coverage, right? Which then, that makes it a lot easier. There's still some lots that are non-conforming, right? Which, would make sense because you don't want to, you still want to be able to control potential development or, situations which may become, make the look and feel and the historic context, put them out of context. So this is directionally heading in the right place, right? Next one. Trying to go fairly quickly here. Okay.
So this is that new slide we talked about.
Yeah. But one of the things we wanted to look at though was what are potential secondary impacts, of changing some of those requirements. And the one that we thought was the most had the most potential challenges was the sizing piece, right? If you change the size of the lot from 7,500 to 5,000, what are the potential secondary implications? And then this speaks to that. So Jaime, why don't you go through this?
Yeah, so, and I want to make a quick note, the gray on the map on the left and the map on the right should be applied to the map in the middle, but I missed that, so I apologize. But basically, currently the lots are required to be 7,500 square feet, and so where you have a lot that is essentially 15,000 square feet, you can put 2 lots and subdivide it, and so on and so forth on multiples of that. Now that doesn't account for a lot of properties that have a significant amount of land that are hills, that are wetlands, that really functionally can't be subdivided, but on a technical nature could be. So we wanted to figure out the numbers of, well, how many subdivisions could you do right now if the requirements were 7,500 square feet, and how many subdivisions would you be able to do if the minimum lot size was brought down to 6,500 or 5,000 square feet. And so currently you can take 181 new lots from the existing count of 1,130 lots that are conforming to the 7,500 square feet or less, right? So that's currently at the 7,500 square feet. That number goes up to 248 if you bring it to 6,500, and it goes up to 471 if you bring it to the S50 lot requirement at 5,000 square feet. So you can see there's a pretty big divergence from the change at 7,500 square feet to 5,000 feet, where there's not a huge variance from 7,500 to 6,500, but it is important to note that if you make a change just across the board and say we're going to implement this S50 in every single aspect, that could lead to potential subdivisions, which is something that should be considered, whether that's an actual goal and whether it's not an actual goal of the adjustments to the zoning code for the S75 for the T district.
Exactly. Yep. Sorry.
So that's it.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is that two other comments as we've been talking through this, right? One is that the reality is that over the last several years there has not been subdivision happening. The number of lots that have been subdivided is very, very low, even though there is a potential for currently subdividing stuff. I think that the thinking is that this as a even though it's a potential secondary effect was something that I think the planning group is not, the planning committee is not necessarily interested in creating this huge opportunity, right? So that drives us to not just blanket accept S50 zoning, right? But provide some adjustments to it. Okay, go ahead. The other thing we looked at real quickly was the front setback requirements, right? Our feeling is that the currently the lots don't necessarily meet the setback requirements, and once again, the current requirements though don't reflect conditions that existed when the code was implemented. Okay, this one's a little bit more complicated, and go to the next page, right? The reality is that, even though there's a setback requirement of, I believe, 30, right, Jaime?
Yeah.
30 feet, the blue are the ones which meet that requirement. Most of them are somewhere between the 10 to 20 foot from the setback requirements, okay? But in order to fix this, one of the challenges is that they vary widely by street and by block. So it's really hard to make a blanket statement across the entire T zone or across the entire S zone or whatever and say that it should be X or Y, okay? And so there's not a specific, detailed recommendation at this point on the setbacks. But what there is an understanding of, next page, is that in reality, you need to consider that moving forward, some analysis needs to be done to consider both street setbacks and lot setbacks, right? Because most of the buildings are 30 feet from the curb, but not the lot line. So, we have no idea about the rationale that went into the code when it was built in the 1960s, but, potentially that this was just a goof. But the reality is that, setbacks from the street to provide, a nice walking distance, most of them are 30 feet from the curb, just not 30 feet from the lot line. And the reality is that varies by block. So you can see this is just an example of how that varies by block. Right. So the point is that, there needs to be a little bit more look into this, but once again, something should be done along this perspective. Okay. The next 2 pages I'll go through really quickly. We looked at, the differences by subzone. But the reality is that we, felt that even though there were some variances, the reality is that they're probably not enough to make significant changes at the subzone level, or to try and implement a subzone level kind of further breakdown of the recommendations. All right, next page. So in this particular lot, this particular area, which is north of Croton, all of these lots are 50 by 150, which means that they don't necessarily meet the bulk requirements, but this is a very nice single family S75 zone, right? And so, you don't need to change anything just for this zone from, on its own. Okay. We talked, this is just another kind of similar analysis we did, looking at the S50 regulations and does it kind of cover most of the lots or not. The challenge here is that even if you go down to a 50-foot width requirement, in the T zones, most of the lots are actually still less wide than 50 feet. So what that means is that even if we move to just to change the zoning, the bulk requirements, there's still going to be a significant number of challenges in houses that need to meet the width, need a width variance in order to improve their buildings. And so that doesn't support what we're trying to do, which is to make it easy to invest in existing housing stock in a way that you don't change the footprint, and you don't change the look and the feel and the location of it, without, to make it so that you can make those changes without going through significant kind of hoops in a regulatory perspective. All right, next. So this is where it ends, we're kind of like the so what. So given all of this, we talked a lot about the T zone and the S75 zones. There's a series of potential solutions, okay, that have been considered by the planning committee. We talked a lot about why on the T and the S75 zone, because that's a very technical kind of set of changes. Where the recommendation currently is coming out is kind of like a mix of shifting. So it's actually even updated, is to change some of the requirements to match S50, except for the square footage requirements, but then also potentially add some text to the zoning, which would, because you have so many lots which still would not even be matching the width requirements in the T zone, and they still need to go through the variances, right? Potentially put some wording in, says what's the existing physical structure would be deemed permissible, right? So if you're like trying to fix up a porch, you can fix up the porch as long as you're keeping exactly the same kind of footprint. If you tear it down, you have to build to the new requirements, right? Or the old structure. You can't like tear it down and build to some new set of requirement to you can't game it. So we're trying to put it that way. Do you think that you need to further investigate front lot setback requirements? Because they're not, necessarily grounded with reality currently, right? And once again, this was all in place when these requirements, these buildings were for the most part put in place when the requirements were changed. Okay. There are a couple of zoning changes, right? And, Jaime, feel free to jump in if you want on any of these, but, the two-family zone, the T district currently doesn't allow two families as of right. It's a conditional use to have a two-family in a two-family zone. So, one of the recommendations is you make that an as of right use, a permitted use in the T zone. There is there were two proposals that are currently in the zoning that I know there probably have a lot of discussion about that are still, up in the air a little bit. One is, in areas where there's specific conditions where it might make sense to offer some sort of what's called a multifamily 3, right? There's no recommendation to specifically like change any districts to MF3 districts, but it could be on a per requested approval required basis. There's another thought in there around accessory units, where if you put specific size limitations and parking requirements, potentially for owner occupied units only, this is one area where you may be able to, provide for some income for people who are owning houses the first time through, or even potentially allow for separation of, grandparents from families in a way that, potentially makes it a little safer in a COVID kind of environment, or for some of the larger lots, like an S100 or an S125, to allow multi-generational facilities from that perspective. The current plan offers some easement adjustments to improve the parking challenges around for shared driveways, right? And reducing the driveway clearance requirements currently. There is a form-based overlay in the downtown areas and on Croton Avenue to sort of focus on the look and feel that everybody wants. And a couple of other kind of potential requirements like, that have been talked about. The last one we've kind of come to the conclusion that, probably don't need to differentiate on subzones from that perspective, right? So this is a set of potential requirements that the subcommittee has discussed. I think that's about it, right? Took a little more than 30 minutes and I talked a lot, sorry about that. And I'm sure there are tons of questions.
Okay, so this leaves us with, it only leaves us unfortunately with 9 minutes for the trustees to ask any of the questions, because I think, frankly, this is an amazing, amazing job. I mean, this is more information than I've seen in years. It's a lot to take in, although I've seen pieces of this. There are a lot of questions because, I've written like a few of them myself, and there's 5 of us, so multiply that out. I don't know how you want to go forward, but we've got now 8 minutes that was left for discussion. So folks, do one of you, I have some top line questions. I'm sure there's some detailed questions, but I don't think enough time's left for a conversation and a period for questions, because I think there's just a whole lot of substance that is being put forth here.
Yeah.
Let me ask my fellow trustees, how do you want to go forward?
I'll email my questions in the consideration of time.
I can't hear anybody.
Bob said he would email his questions.
Yeah, I'll email my questions.
Can I ask a question? Or
Yep.
accessory units, are those within the house or are those over a garage or how is that defined?
I don't think yeah, you want to try to answer it, Pat, or do you want me to answer it?
Go ahead. Yeah, you're going to give the same answer, I think.
Okay, so I think that accessory units are defined by the amount of, like, the size of those units more than the physical location. So it's about making sure that they're not too big. So you don't want an accessory unit that's a 2,500 square foot house, next door. It could be a building that's not directly connected to the house. It could be like a pool house type of situation. But the concern is more about making sure that it's not too big. So I don't think we have a full detail of it. It would be less than 1,000 square feet, and it would have to have parking on site available. So you also wouldn't want to create accessory units that don't have the ability to provide parking on site.
Yeah,
And
but I think
reason for recommending accessory units as of right, is that what we're saying? Is that it provides?
no, you would. I think the way we've talked about it is that you would need to have some sort of an approval, right? To put an accessory unit.
Come to the homeowner?
Yeah, so there are two potential values to it, right? One is, on the income side, like you mentioned, right? So, for somebing who's got a larger house, who's got space, larger lot, and like I said, an S100, S75, S100, S125, potentially S75, right? If there is a small structure that they can either rent out to, a student at Pace, or because I know there's actually a big market for that, student at Pace or someone local, or even to have in-laws or, kids living there from within the household, that's an opportunity to either one, provide income to sort of ease the, the home ownership costs, or to provide for, multi-generational housing to allow, for a smooth transition to kids and allow people to stay, right? The same holds true, personally, I believe the same holds true for new homeowners at the lower end. If somebody's got, just buying into a $400,000 house, but, has the ability to get, $800 and, $750 a month in rent, that makes, the potential for home ownership, it expands the opportunity for home ownership at the lower end as well, right? The negative side of it is that there's, a small increase in potential density, right? That's the flip side of it. So.
Mayor, if I may, I really do want to thank Pat and Melissa for this, and Jaime to put all this whole thing together. I do have a couple things that I would like to say. There was a lot of information in here to digest. Some of the stuff, I am one of the members of the steering committee, but some of the stuff I was not aware of this. A lot of details, I was not part of this discussion. That being said, because we have a very limited time this morning, my suggestion will be to hold this in another situation. Maybe, I don't know how lengthy our agenda will be for the legislative session on the continuing business, and have a deeper discussion among ourselves. Because this is a public meeting, I would like to continue the public meeting discussion. We can email questions to our staff, but I think the discussion should be in a public setting, because this, again, we are having one right now. So that will be my suggestion. That will be my 2 cents. I have a lot of questions on here, and I just don't have enough time. So, but thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know how you could have made this shorter. I'm sure there's always a way to make presentations fit the time that was allotted. But honestly, I don't know which page I would have not included, because each page was so rich with information that, I don't know what I would have done. You can speak faster, I guess, but honestly, then none of us would have understood anything anyway. So I really am going to say again, it's a tremendous amount of information. It's terrific information. Should have been done in the 1960s, apparently, and in the 1930s. My takeaway is quite different than some of the things that are being said, and I'm trying to think of the best forum. Number one, that these presentations have to be more concise would be an ask I have as we go forward this year. But I don't know how to have done that if I were sitting on the other side. So I agree with Manny. We have to continue this. We can send you some questions, make some comments. For some of us, maybe most of us, it's the first time we're seeing all of this. Would have liked to have had this in advance of this meeting. Maybe I got it and I didn't see it, but I don't
You
know.
did send it out on Thursday.
So I just didn't see it. You send this version out on Thursday?
Yep. I mean, I think we had one slide change, but yes.
Oh, okay. I'm
It was
sorry.
the
No,
latest-
look, and I sent you an email this morning. Either I'm having issues because this is not the first one.
I
I'm
think
not.
you're probably inundated, so it's
I
understandable.
don't know. I actually specifically looked for this. That's why I emailed you earlier. But you know, that's on me. Everybody else in the room has it, then it's just on me, and I will catch up. But I did speak to Pat and to Melissa in detail about their experience on this, how the consultants are doing. What they think of the process. It was a bigger conversation than just this. And in that conversation, Pat actually probably gave me 70% of the information I'm seeing now. So I've had the information. I just haven't seen it physically in front of me, which just looks different and it's fantastic. So what do you want to do as the next step? We are going to keep our meetings going forward in 21. To our word, recognizing people's value of time. So how do we want to go next step? Manny's suggesting to continue.
Yeah. I don't know. So part of the reason that we scheduled this special meeting is because we knew it would go over. And actually, I think that we did tighten it up a lot. And again, it doesn't leave a tremendous amount of time for questions when you're doing it in an hour. We certainly want you to look at this information. It was really a way to get it out to you with the explanation. Obviously, just handing you the presentation would have been a little bit challenging to go through. So really, I think we achieved the purpose of this meeting. This is really an iterative process because we do recognize that you're going to have a lot that you need to absorb as a board, that the public's going to have a lot to absorb. So we're just trying to get the information out there. So we can use this video as a tool to do this. And I think that I would like to regroup with the steering committee and my colleagues to figure out what the best way to continue this dialogue to make sure that everybody really fully understands the issues and why the recommendations are coming forth and how this was culled from the actual input that we got through the subcommittee meetings and all the outreach that was done. So I think there's a way to do that, the combination of special meetings and obviously this is recorded, and then distilling that into a more concise top line presentation at the board meetings probably will work, but it is going to have to be an iterative process because if you don't get this depth of background, it's sort of hard to fully absorb. So why don't you, unless somebody has an immediate brainstorm, I think that we can regroup now and get back to you on how we would schedule this going forward. Just to make sure that we cover all those bases.
And Karen,
and it's always nice to see Jamie Kane, who I never see on any of these meetings. Hi, Jamie.
So
she's not seeing me. I think I'm frozen.
Sorry.
I see you. It's nice to see you all too.
Oh, you guys all just froze. Hi, Jamie. So we're gonna go ahead, Karen, if you want to. Somebody was speaking, but I'm frozen.
Sorry.
So there's
Mayor, I was asking Karen, since that this is now in a public meeting, the presentation, is that going to be, you guys going to be tying this back into, or putting this into our website as well? So now that the public be able to, because I'm sure, you know, again, we really don't have any attendance right now. It's just us. So there's not really public. I'm sure if we start mentioning this, my hope is public will actually watch this and actually see the presentation in hand, and I'm sure they'll have questions as well. So then we can figure out if it's appropriate for us to have a continuation or continuing business next week, or we can figure out another time. I think my suggestion will be not to have an hour time frame. I think this will definitely be more like 2 hours discussion at some point.
We're gonna we may want to leave a follow-up special meeting open too, because right now our presentations are pretty we're scheduled with a lot of time sensitive presentations, so we can look what we can do within the board meetings as well as creating other platforms. We also have we're looking, well, we'll go back and figure out the best way.
This is one of the chapters, right?
Pardon me?
I think Rika said it's one of the
This
chapters.
is just one of a number of chapters. This is not the entire comprehensive plan. This is only one chapter.
It's a pretty expansive part of the comprehensive plan. So while it's focused, it's also probably the most difficult to, it's got the most technical detail. So really, this is the zoning.
Yeah, no question. I'm just saying. Yeah, we have to time it within a larger context.
Right. So we also are looking at, Maddie, correct me if I'm wrong, we were looking at the fifth, no, we don't have a fifth Wednesday this week. Why I'm looking at Fridays. We can also try to, that's why I'm trying to say, like, we need time to make sure that this is digested. We'll look at the public meeting schedule for the comp plan as well as other opportunities we have in the board meetings to make sure that we get this information. We thought it was most important that the board members all had access to this, because ultimately you will be voting on accepting the zoning recommendations in conjunction with the comprehensive plan.
I mean, I can ask, and I'll be asking my colleagues, is it suitable for us to have a special meeting on a Thursday night to have a deeper discussion in regards to this topic? Because I feel that a lot of this, I mean, part of this presentation was great. I just didn't think it hit everything that was mentioned on this. It was just very a focus on two zones, sure, the T zone and the S75 in comparison to what the overall is. So I, again, my reception of this whole thing is going to be at least a 2-hour meeting, just on this presentation. So
because I think Manny, the reality is that there were, well, the technical analysis was on the S75 and then on the T zone. The last page of recommendations, there are number of potential ideas that have been brought up at the in the different comprehensive planning meetings that weren't necessarily part of the technical discussion, I think is what you're saying, right? So really, it's the discussion about answering questions that came out of the today, as well as the discussion around the potential recommendations on the last page.
Correct. And
really what the agenda is the next
time. One of the things, and I don't want to kind of deviate of the conversation, but the other stuff was like actually looking at the zoning map itself and seeing and rezoning some of the stuff that may not be had been appropriate, which was mentioned here, but it wasn't really a specific topic. So again, there's a lot of pieces that are there, but they're not that we haven't touched as a whole. So I think part of what the mayor was talking about, is yes, it's just a section, but it's a section that kind of takes arms in different ways.
It's huge.
So,
right. Some of the, we will look, what I want to do is look at the overlay. There'll be 2 presentations with BFJ on the 10th, and on February 10th, and then we have a follow-up presentation subsequent to that, which will deal with the comp plan and zoning. So we will have those opportunities. What we wanted to do is just make sure, this is just too much information to take in one meeting, almost no matter how long it is. So we wanted to just make sure that we had opportunities to bring you along with this. So when we get to, our other meetings, it's not a complete data dump with no end in sight. So.
Okay, so my understanding is also that there are 2 RFPs with the consultants. So we have to be clear what we're looking at. If this is the zoning piece or the comp plan piece, or it's both, I think that also gets confusing. And I think, Pat, the issue in presentations about anything, is what is being looked at and what isn't being looked at. There might be people on this call who might say, gee, I'm surprised that this item wasn't addressed. So having left things off or not listing the things that you looked at but have decided to leave off the plan is something we will be asking about as well. It's just leveling expectations. I think that's the way it just is in presentations. What is being presented and curated, what in agreements and disagreements, ask for more data, more information, and then, a surprise sort of element that says, gee, what I call the surprise element. I'm surprised you didn't address this. I'm surprised you didn't address it and say we looked at it and we've eliminated it for this 3 reasons. I'm surprised you didn't do it, and the answer might be we didn't even think about it, but we will. So there's that element too. What's not in this presentation will also sort of be addressed, because some of the people who are sitting on this call actually have quite extensive knowledge of zoning and planning, having had those opportunities even before they got on the board. So I think that'll be an added value, certainly more than I. So we're going to have a couple of more meetings. We have an opportunity for the next 48 hours or longer to, in writing, who's coordinating all the questions. It's a public meeting. This meeting is available to the public. So who is collecting all the questions, who is answering, because it ain't going to be the entire gallery. That's not going to work. And we, so who's doing, like, what should the public know if they have questions right now based on this, which has been recorded and available?
So if the public has questions, they can email them to the village manager's email on the website. We'll distill them here and make sure that they are responded to. The board subsequently can send questions to, it'd probably be good to send questions to this staff team here. We will make sure that they're managed and answered timely. Then what we'll do is we will put together a list of all related meetings to the comp plan that are coming up, that are currently scheduled, or ones that we may suggest to be scheduled if needed, and we will identify more specifically the subject matter in those meetings, because it does get very specific. It is a little bit complicated, but this way, this meeting was really designed to put really background information on some very specific recommendations and how they affected a broader array of recommendations as well.
Yeah, no, agreed, and it's fantastic. I can't say that enough, and I keep saying that.
Might put it in context with the process, I think, right, is what you're asking.
Might I suggest that you set up a new email specific to this initiative so that there's documentation of all the questions that are being asked and available to the people sitting on this gallery, and that they not be so quickly answered by an individual, distilled or otherwise, but rather that it goes into one email so that the people involved, both elected and staff, will be able to look at the questions. And when they're answered, they will probably need to be answered, because it might be a factual thing. I don't understand page 12. I can't see the bottom right hand. That's an easy one, but commentary and suggestions need to be available also to the trustees. So I would suggest setting up an email. And I see Maddie shaking her head, so I'm thinking that's
Can I interrupt you and say that we already have this set up as plan@villageofossining.org, and Jaime has access to it, and so do I. That was originally what this email address was set up for.
Yeah, but none of the elected officials did. It's not a group email. That is an email for questions.
Okay, I'll speak to
you. Don't need to take the time to do it now. But the goal is that we are now in, like, it would be the exact same thing, that we should have access to the question. Simply to see the questions, it would actually inform us about what people are asking. So that is my request. So that just means you have to open it up to more people being able to look at it.
Okay, we can also see if we can get that email so that it lands in everyone's accounts as well.
Yeah, it could be pointed to multiple accounts. I'm just asking that.
Yeah, sure, I'll reach out to
I would
Chris.
like to see questions.
Similar to what we've done for DPW, perhaps we could do a rolling FAQ on the plan website, which will then compile all questions asked either by the board or the public, so that it's on a rolling FAQ. That seems to be working well for the DPW site. So why don't we just take that one?
Yeah, and also people will not. Some people may look at it and go, oh, my question's been asked 8 times already. Here is the answer. That's what's great about FAQs. It will, in the long run, really create a bubble of collective questions. And the outliers of what's on page 12, easy one to answer, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So thank you all for.
I don't see Melissa on here. I'm sorry for interrupting, Karen. Did she come on? Because I wanted to officially thank her as well. And I know that that's happened, but I mean, it's a meeting.
I'm not sure. I wasn't looking, but I know that she had some last minute stuff pop up.
No problems. But I wanted to mention my gratitude to both you, Pat, and to Melissa, who are co-chairs. I know you did a lot of talking, but I also want to let the public know, if somebody sees this, that there are 2 of you working like hand in hand on this. I just wanted to comment that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think Melissa was able to make it, but certainly she'll see this and we'll convey that to her as well. I want to thank you all for your time today. Thank you to obviously the steering committee, Pat, Melissa, and Jaime for pulling this data together. And we will put together a meeting schedule with very discrete information on the topics and how the different points. This is actually something that we've asked BFJ to be more specific with too. So we'll get that to you as soon as possible. And again, thank you for your time.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Yes, motion to adjourn.
That's why I'm here.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you tonight, folks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.